Hello, welcome to Grid Live Wrap-Up. Joe Samaniego here, and with me we have Ben Schneider from Grid Encore and NASCAR.info and Kobe Lambeth from Grid Tonight. A big thank you to our Patreon investors Colin, Deshelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew for investing in the Grid Network. Fan is so excited they got to play again, so we'll tell them to head on back, take care of everything, but you're going to get some stickers and you invest in the Grid Network. That's what all these investors have done. They've received the stickers, $10 or more through Super Chat or Buy Me a Coffee, and you also could get some Grid Network stickers. So once again, invest in us because this is a big weekend. Of course, as many of you know, Jackson was at the Thermal Club, but we'll start with the big story. Ben, from Melbourne, Australia, the streak has been broken. Max Verstappen was not on the top spot of the podium, which was much nicer than the podium at the Thermal Club.
That's for sure. That loop being on default will get you every time. I know from hosting the Encore show, I've done that same thing before. But let's talk about the Australian Grand Prix here. Certainly a race that everybody's not going to forget for a very long time here. Max Verstappen was on the pole. What a surprise there. Led the first couple of laps. But then Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari using DRS got around Verstappen on the backstretch. But then on lap 4, it got even worse for Verstappen. Smoke started appearing from his car. He was done for the day. Sainz and the Ferrari team, meanwhile, ran a flawless race to claim a 1-2 finish with Leclerc following up in P2. Now, Ferrari used pit strategy to get Leclerc ahead of the two McLarens, who were their closest competition. Joe, let's start with you here. Carlos Sainz once again ends the Max Verstappen streak and only 2 weeks removed from his appendix surgery as well. Very impressive job well done. But was this his most impressive win in his career so far?
I would say yes. Now, Silverstone, when he won there, that was very impressive. He really demonstrated how smart of a driver he is, knowing what to do when Ferrari wanted him to help Charles Leclerc. He knew that would endanger his lead. Then we had Singapore. A lot of folks were just thinking, well, okay, he did great. Singapore is very hard to pass. But this racetrack, considering the circumstances of what he just went through with the surgery, come back, and now be in victory lane, and considering we all know what happened in the offseason, he's going to be out of a ride. He just showed pure speed out there. I was just so impressed with him qualifying. I know Isha talked about, she really thought maybe Carlos Sainz could get the pole. She was considering Carlos Sainz for pick winner, but of course, Verstappen got the pole. As soon as he led the first corner, I was thinking, okay, it might be over. But Carlos Sainz was just right there, made that pass, controlled this race. Absolutely. And Ferrari did a great job with strategy. No mistakes. Great job by the entire team. Yes, in my opinion, this was his most impressive victory.
Yeah, Joe, I don't really have too much more to add, but I thought Carlos Sainz did a fantastic job. Once Max Verstappen retired from the race, he took full advantage of it and went out there and completely dominated. Quite a drive by the Ferrari driver. Now we'll talk a little bit more about this in the next question, but I think Carlos has a chip on his shoulder. He wants to show Ferrari something, that Lewis Hamilton, adding him to a team is great and all, but look what you're losing here, that I'm capable of going out there and getting the job done week after when the opportunity arises. I think Carlos Sainz did a really good job of maximizing the moment and what happened, the unexpected moment. Who would have thought Max Verstappen would have gone out of the Australian Grand Prix? I'll say 9 out of 10 of people who watch this Formula One race expected to see Max Verstappen take the lead in the turn 1, and that was it. Congratulations to Max on another win. But to our surprise, it wasn't the case. Instead, it was the smooth operator putting together a smooth performance and who ended up winning the Australian Grand Prix. I thought this was a super impressive drive by Carlos Sainz.
Well, Joe, you mentioned it. Sainz, of course, out of a job at the end of the year. He mentioned that as well in his post-race interview. Of course, Lewis Hamilton coming to a team next year, and in 2 races that he started here, Lewis Hamilton, his best finish was 7th at Bahrain. Of 2 races he finished, I guess I should say. He finished behind Russell in all races this year, has not won since Saudi Arabia in 2021. Of course, Mercedes have really struggled since the new regulations came into effect the following year. So, Kobe, we'll go to you first for this one. Does this create an interesting dynamic in which Sainz, being the driver who's going to be let go for Hamilton, performs better than not just his current teammate in Charles Leclerc, but his future teammate at Lewis Hamilton, who will be teammates at Ferrari next year?
Well, I will say it looks like this year's Mercedes car is not not good once again, and it looks like it's going to be a very challenging season for Lewis Hamilton. And since Lewis is having a lame duck year, it would not surprise me if we see Mercedes prioritize George Russell throughout the season. And then Lewis Hamilton will basically just get leftovers, so to speak. But looking at the Ferrari teammates, Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc, I think it's going to be very interesting to see, if Carlos Sainz can outperform Leclerc throughout the year. I know a lot of people probably expect, Leclerc to outperform him, but I think Carlos Sainz is fired up. And like I said in my previous answer, I think he wants to prove something to Ferrari that, hey, you should have given me the contract extension instead of going out there to sign Lewis Hamilton. And maybe if Carlos, keeps this up, he could be in line for another top seat at a Formula One team. And I certainly think he's certainly off to a good start improving his case.
Improving his case, and at the same time helping out his teams, because we know sometimes things could go sour when it's a lame duck year, you're going to be out of a seat. Carlos Sainz, it just seems from Bahrain to Australia, he just seems to be more motivated to go out there, get the win. It's just amazing to me the kind of performance he's doing. If we've seen this the last two seasons, I think Ferrari probably would have not have thought about, do we keep Carlos or do we go with Lewis? Because right now he is just performing like he should be, up towards the front. He's finishing ahead of Charles Leclerc. He got this win. The only driver to win the last, 21 races besides Max Verstappen is him with his 2 wins. It's just really impressive what Carlos Sainz has been doing. I think he could really demonstrate that you're on your way out rather than making it toxic, not putting it in the results. You're just going out there, running your own race, setting the bar high for everyone, and at the same time just increasing your stock value. I think this just more demonstrates his talent as a team, as a driver, and putting the team first. Because at the end, Ferrari 1-2 finish, they have to be smiling.
Well, let's catch up on the chat room here. I understand we have a couple of comments that have come in from Adam. Last time Carlos Sainz won, this was brought up as well. George Russell also crashed at Singapore last year. And then Ray Smith, any pace car moments during the Australian Grand Prix? Who was your star driver of the race? I'm not exactly. I guess you're asking if there was a safety car. I know there was at least one virtual when Lewis lost his engine, and then I guess maybe on the last lap when Russell crashed. But I think your star of the race certainly has to be Carlos Sainz for getting the win.
Sainz, I'll maybe even throw in there Yuki, because considering the difference between him and Ricardo too.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, well, we move on now. Let's talk about the team that everybody expected to dominate like usual. Carlos Sainz still behind Leclerc in the driver's standings. Ferrari only 4 points behind that very team in Red Bull. Now, Verstappen, of course, like we said, out on lap 4, according to Christian Horner, Red Bull's team principal. It was a brake issue that caused his retirement. Sergio Perez, meanwhile, had a dismal 5th-place finish, never really a factor for the podium, and well behind the Ferraris and the McLarens. So, Joe, does this change your attitude or your mindset that we've had for a long time now that Red Bull's just going to walk away with this? It's going to be a complete cakewalk to the Constructors' title. Do you think Ferrari might be thinking to themselves, maybe we can make this a real challenge now?
I gotta say, yes. I think they're really showing they can make this a real challenge. Carlos Sainz, podium in Bahrain, ran a great race. Unfortunately, what happened in Saudi Arabia, having to go under surgery. But then look what the Ferrari responded with. Charles Leclerc, podium. Oliver Berman, debut, top 10 finish. That's super impressive from a team that for so long, it just seems like they crack under pressure. They just make questionable calls. And then this weekend, Charles Leclerc, he needed a strategy to get around the 2 McLarens. Once that occurred, he got that podium as well too. So overall, I think this is a new Ferrari. Fred Vasseur, team principal, now that he's been there, I believe his 3rd season, I think he's really demonstrating that he is putting together something special that could really bring the fight to Red Bull. I think Red Bull still has the favorite, but Ferrari's there.
Yeah, Joe. I think Ferrari's, just maybe a couple of steps away from Red Bull on a regular day. But I'm looking at 2025, 2026 as the year that Ferrari can truly potentially take the fight Red Bull with Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton in the driver lineup. And the answer to the question has been my attitude hasn't changed at all about Red Bull. I truly believe that they're still gonna go away, take the drivers' championship with Max and the constructors as well. But as we saw in Australia, if Red Bull has an off day, Ferrari is going to be there to pounce, whether it's Charles Leclerc or Carlos Sainz. I still think Red Bull is definitely going to be the top dog in Formula One throughout the rest of the year, but I think Ferrari's gotten a lot closer to them.
A couple points to follow up on, Joe, just on Mattia Binotto and Frederick Vasseur. It was at the end of 22 that he was let go, so it's his second season. But I guess in some ways it feels like the third because of how long these seasons have been, both in terms of a number of races and how long they felt with just the nonstop Red Bull dominance. But if I had to answer this question here, I've got to side with Kobe in this one. I think that, it might be flashbacks to 2015 when Sebastian Vettel went out and won in Malaysia, the second race of the year. And everybody thought maybe this is Ferrari showing that they might be able to take a challenge, take the fight to Mercedes. Ultimately, however, Mercedes still pulled away pretty comfortably, even though Vettel did win 3 races that year. So maybe that's a number that Ferrari can shoot for, maybe even surpass. But I think that in terms of a championship, what do I always say about Ferrari, right? Just be patient. With Dallas Cowboys of Formula One, I think that ultimately they're not going to be able to take the fight to Red Bull for the entire year. And they're still probably going to walk away with the constructors as Verstappen will the drivers. But as they say, this is why races aren't run on paper. And we saw proof of that with Ferrari and Carlos Sainz this weekend. Now, Ferrari, of course, off to a strong start, having 3 drivers score points this year, including Oliver Behrman. Ferrari and McLaren are the only teams with double points in every race, but another team with a surprise double points result in Australia was Haas. Haas had 4 points this year, 7th ahead of Williams, Sauber, and Alpine, who are still looking for their first points of the season. Mercedes did not have a great start, scoring 0 points. Hamilton out with the engine failure. Of course, George Russell also had a hard crash at the end of the race. They're now 1 point ahead of Aston Martin in the constructor standings, but they got a little bit lucky with Fernando Alonso getting that 20-second penalty. They would have been in 5th position just behind them otherwise. So, Kobe, how much trouble do you think Mercedes is in, especially considering we've got another long trip all the way to Japan for next race weekend?
And before I answer your question, Ben, I actually wanted to ask you a quick question. What's going to happen first? Will the Dallas Cowboys win the Super Bowl, or will Ferrari win a Formula One World Championship again? What happens first?
I think we're going to have humans on Mars before either one of those happens, but that's just my personal opinion there. We'll have an open segment on the Encore show tomorrow. I know we're in a little bit of a time crunch tonight, but I certainly have some thoughts on Formula One. I have some thoughts on Alex Albon failing to score points in the whole Williams deal. Everybody knows that for sure. So more on my opinions of the race on tomorrow's Encore show with Brandon Crossland. But in the meantime, Kobe, I'll hand it back to you here.
All right. Thank you. But based on Joe's just cracking up over here, and based on what I saw in Australia, I think Mercedes looks like a team that very well could be in trouble. Unfortunate for Lewis Hamilton having a retirement there. No, it's very rare to see Lewis Hamilton retire from a race. And what are the odds of seeing Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen retire in the same Grand Prix, which is really, really odd. And then George Russell to have that very strange crash at the very end of the Australian Grand Prix, and seeing how they're struggling for pace, especially on Hamilton's side. It just doesn't bode well for Mercedes moving forward in 2024. Yes, there's going to be upgrades coming on down the line. We'll see if that helps the case, but Mercedes definitely doesn't look like a team that's going to be capable of competing for wins anytime soon.
I'm going to make a bold prediction just after Kobe's question to Ben. If Max Verstappen, for some reason, is not in Red Bull next year, I think Ferrari has a shot at the Drivers' Championship in 2025. But that's the big key. Verstappen has to move. Because overall, they're getting better. Mercedes, the state of their car, the team, I just feel is not there. If they were to get a new driver, presumably Max Verstappen, their car is still going to need a lot of work. Max is not just going to come in, make everything great, and dominate. This year, George Russell, he's doing good races overall. But then this one, granted, Alonso got the penalty, looked like put Russell in the bad spot. I just feel like Russell's not exactly on that high caliber to compete against Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton, maybe even Charles Leclerc. I'm starting to maybe lose stock belief in George Russell overall. So overall, I think it's going to be a long year for Mercedes. I'm just not convinced they're going to be able to go out there, get a win this year. I think they might be going winless. It's going to be a long year for them. Lewis Hamilton, the way he has performed, he just doesn't seem he enjoys driving that car. I just think it's just going to be a matter of just going out there, try to get the points. Maybe we get a crazy race and you get lucky. The Red Bulls are taking each other out with the McLarens and the Ferraris. Maybe you got a shot to win, but I just don't see anything happening for them. I think they are in trouble because we're going straight to Japan right after this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, certainly Mercedes have had a couple of down years by their standards. Of course, like I always say, there are plenty of teams that, would love to be in the position that they're in right now. But given the championship caliber history that they had for so many years with Lewis Hamilton in particular, certainly not where they want to be. And perhaps that's why Lewis Hamilton is looking for some bigger and better things at Ferrari next year. We'll just have to wait and see what happens over there. But let's talk about the team that has been so dominant and what's going on behind the scenes over there, because certainly despite all their wins and championships in the last couple of years, things are not all sunshine and rainbows over at Red Bull Racing. They always seem to have a supply of driver drama over there after a 3-place grid penalty. Sergio Perez, of course, not a factor in this race. It was Daniel Ricciardo's home race. If you want to extend it over to the Visa Cash App RB team, of course, he picked up no points, but he did get his best finish of the year in 12th, but solidly behind his teammate Yuki Tsunoda. He had a very good day, a 7th-place finish. All of those drivers have unknown futures, and perhaps maybe even Max Verstappen's, even though he doesn't have an unknown future on paper. Those rumors are beginning to swirl. Of course, he had his issue, many rumors regarding the Horner mess, everything's still going on right now at that team. So, Joe, how big of a mess is the Red Bull situation at the moment? And does this look like the same organization that, to be honest, looked unbeatable before the DNF this weekend for Max Verstappen?
I'm thinking what we saw today was the first crack of the unbeatable image that they had always had lately. Max Verstappen going out so early with some sort of mechanical issue, but as they're saying, potentially something with the brakes. I'm starting to wonder, is the pressure going to start building up with all the distractions going on? More mistakes are going to be made. One of the big things, the drivers, they don't want to be asked questions about what's going on in the team, the rumors. They just want to go focus out there, get the race win. On top of that, you got everything going on between Yuki Tsunoda, Daniel Ricciardo. We know that team has had a history of, you had Pierre Gasly go from Red Bull back to AlphaTauri. You had Alex Albon go up to Red Bull, then gets demoted down. Sergio Perez. That was always a distraction, but Red Bull, Max Verstappen was just going out there winning, and was just, well, you just got to keep up with Max. Now if Max is gone, who is that lead driver? I don't think really any of those three could be making the case that they're the lead driver. It'd be interesting what Yuki Tsunoda could do with a Red Bull, but it is a big mess. They are not the same unbeatable team, and I think this driver mess is just the latest problem that's going to potentially really become a bigger problem with the Red Bull organization.
Yeah, and looking at this whole Red Bull situation, it seems like, Max Verstappen is basically Red Bull, and then you have everybody else after that. It's kind of like drafting a quarterbacking, and not having a team around you. Not throwing shade at my Carolina Panthers there. I promise you that I'm not Mr. Tepper. I hope you're not watching this, but looking at all of these drivers, Daniel Ricciardo, Yuki Tsunoda, Sergio Perez, I can't. If Max Verstappen ends up leaving and going to another team, let's say Mercedes or whoever else, I don't really know who could truly step into that role at Red Bull and lead the team, because Max is the number one, and he's the one who's really making things happen for Red Bull, and it's just a really messy situation. Looking at the driver situation, especially the off the track drama that we've been talking about for weeks on our Grid Tonight shows related to Christian Horner, among other things. And Daniel Ricciardo, a lot of people expected him to potentially replace Sergio Perez in that second Red Bull car at some point this season or at the start of next season. But so far, we haven't really seen anything from Daniel Ricciardo that would warrant a change or anything like that. Yuki Tsunoda, who knows where he could be in the future. I know Honda really likes Yuki, so when Aston Martin is going to be switching to the Honda power unit. It'll be interesting to see if he could move over there to that team once that partnership gets underway. Yeah. So to answer your question, Ben, it's just quite a messy situation. I don't know what life at Red Bull looks like after Max Verstappen.
Some people saying, of course, the old Toro Rosso lineup from 2015, 2016 is combined to win the last however many races, with Sainz being the only one other than Verstappen. I don't know. He's out of a job. Maybe Red Bull would give him a call if there's an open seat. We're just going to have to wait and see what happens there. But what a story that would be if he came home to the Red Bull family in that sense there. Now, let's close with McLaren. Lando Norris got his first podium of the year. He now is in sole possession of the record for most podiums without a Grand Prix win. I'm sure a record that he is desperate to no longer be holding. Third place for him, fourth place for his teammate Oscar Piastri. Team orders, however, came into play as Piastri at one point moved to let Norris by. I'm sure it disappointed many Australians who wanted to see one of their home drivers on the podium. Now, Norris did close the gap on Leclerc, but was unable to get around for second place. Piastri is 1 point ahead of Norris in the driver's standings following his home race in Australia. So, Kobe, McLaren's 38 behind Ferrari, 29 ahead of Mercedes, with the drivers themselves only separated by 1 point. Do you think McLaren should step back and let their drivers race rather than imposing team orders?
I think everyone here at Grid Network knows how we feel about team orders. They should absolutely step back and just let the drivers race, because nobody really likes to see the team orders and all this stuff happen. I'm sure it was very frustrating for Oscar Piastri, but like, what is he gonna do in that situation? So at the end of the day, he has to do what they say is best for the team. So he moved to let Lando by, and like you were saying, Ben, a lot of Australian fans, who come to this event every year to see, their favorite Aussie drivers, like Piastri, they want to see him get up there on the podium, and for him to have to get up, and obviously very, very frustrating. It's frustrating anytime we see team orders, and not just Formula One, but in any type of motorsport.
Very frustrating for Oscar Piastri having to do that, and I think overall, it's too early in the year to be doing team orders already. I mean, we're only a few races into the season. You got to realize that Lando Norris, it could be a bad race and he finds himself further back. Why are we going to take away this opportunity for Piastri if he's up front? Now, granted, I get the idea. Well, Lando's showing more pace, maybe could catch up, and he did, but he couldn't get around. So we're surprised then there was revert back to how it was before. But I think this is something where going forward, and especially now that the two of them are just separated by 1 point, McLaren has to just let the two drivers race. You cannot start interfering and then, making what should be a straightforward race more complicated, because you're trying to manage, okay, what's the situation? Who needs to be out front this time? Just stay out of it and let their drivers race. That's the best thing McLaren can do.
All right. We'll leave it there. In the meantime, Joe, let's move on and talk about the NASCAR Cup Series race at Circuit of the Americas. Certainly some interesting things going on there this weekend as well.
Very interesting. And of course, they were in Circuits of Americas, as you mentioned, EchoPark Grand Prix. Only 2 cautions, Ben, and I know a lot of folks are going to be bringing up about, it should have been a caution-free race, and it's like, oh man, because at the end, William Byron, he pretty much controlled the day, but he had to do what we've seen all the time, sacrifice the stage points, make the pit stops, but that just put him in a better spot to where he was always getting prime real estate for that win yesterday on the pre-race show. Easton Jackson, Todd, and we all talk about Byron. He only had 1 top 10 finish after the Daytona 500, but now he got to win. First repeat winner of 2024. So does this make William Byron, in your opinion, one of those drivers that could win at any track?
Yeah, what was the call as Mike Joy was calling him home, right? His 12th career win. I think he's got, the road courses with Super Speedway, obviously with Daytona 500 this year. There you go, 12 wins and 222 starts. I know it got off to a bit of a slower start, and you can maybe make the argument he might have been promoted a year or two earlier than we were expecting, but he has certainly come into his own and looks like a championship contender. Hendrick Motorsports have a really good thing going with their driver right now, and I think absolutely he is a driver that we have to start looking at as a weekly threat who can win on any given Sunday.
any given Sunday, he could go out there, get the win. I have to agree with you because at first, especially that rookie year, I felt he was one of those drivers. If he was up front, but then some reason fall mid pack, gets himself in a crash, just always that kind of scenario. But now he's driving smart races. He falls back, works his way towards the front, doesn't put himself in a back position anymore, and is now getting these wins. Just really impressive what he has done. And one of the big things compared to his teammate Kyle Larson, pretty disappointing day for Kyle Larson's standards, especially since he had that win the day before, which I know he'll talk a lot about and how that could have been very different. But overall, Ty Gibbs, third place. Many predicted he would be the points leader after this race. Guess what? There he is, third place. Now, yesterday, and you might talk about this, he had some questionable moves, and people were, oh, this is Ty Gibbs being Ty Gibbs. But today, he looked a lot more mature, drove a smart race. But do you think Ty Gibbs' second year can continue this kind of performance, especially now with more attention because he's the points leader?
That is a crazy stat that Ty Gibbs is a points leader. This many races into the year. I know it's still early, but it's not like he lucked his way into winning the Daytona 500 and then he's the points leader by default. Although I guess now that I think about it, we have stages nowadays, so the Daytona 500 winner's not guaranteed to be the points leader after the first race anymore, regardless. But that it just speaks to Ty Gibbs' talent. The talent is certainly there, and we've never questioned that. We've only ever questioned the maturity. And I think that obviously just being in the Cup Series alone, certainly, we talked about this with Carson Hocevar after the truck race at Phoenix last year. It is certainly a bigger microscope to be under when you're racing with well-respected veterans and champions of the sport every Sunday. More television viewers are tuned in. I mean, you are just under a much larger set of eyes here with how many people are tuning into these races and the amount of highly respected people that are involved with these races. So, just take away the points leader status for a second. Of course, Ty's, going to have more attention on him. And then couple that with the fact that he's gotten off to such a great start this year, seems to be knocking on the door every week of getting that maiden victory in this series. Yeah, there's certainly much more attention on him right now. And I think he recognizes that. And maybe, again, maybe it speaks to the maturity that maybe he thinks he can get away with more in the Xfinity Series when he continues to make a handful of starts down there than he can in Cup. I've been very impressed with his step up in maturity in the Cup Series. But like you said, there were a couple of moments yesterday that still kind of left us scratching our heads. So we may talk about those again on the Encore show tomorrow. Certainly an interesting finish there. But yeah, I think Ty absolutely now more than ever being somebody who could be amazingly this early in his career a contender to make a deep playoff run. Yeah, absolutely more attention on him.
A deep playoff run. It's just going to be really interesting to see what he could do this year. That maturity level, I think, is going to be the big thing because, like you said, the talent is there. I think a lot of folks have faith in him. So overall, it looks like it's going to be one of those deals where it's going to be following what happens. One of the things we are seeing an unofficial report that it shows Ty 5 points actually behind Martin Truex Jr. So once that's officially formalized, we'll definitely update everyone on it. But one of those head scratchers that Martin Truex looks like just 5 ahead of Ty Gibbs, Ryan Blaney third, and Denny Hamlin, Kyle Larson, your top 5 in the points. Now, one thing, speak about the points and top 5, let's go the driver results from today's race. Top 10s, Chris Buescher, the only Ford in the top 10. Logano, Blaney, Briscoe, they all came in behind by 11th, 12th, 13th, so they weren't too far behind. But Ford is still winless this year, and here's a very interesting stat I saw. The last time Ford did not win any of the first 6 races in a season, 2010, that took them 21 races with Greg Biffle and Pocono getting the win. Do you think Ford teams have to do some more extra work to get this dark horse Mustang up to speed?
Yeah, I think so. I think, I don't know. Again, I don't know if it's time to hit the panic button just yet if you're Ford, but I think certainly when you look at the success of Chevrolet, obviously off to probably the best start of the year, Toyota looking very strong last weekend. And like you mentioned, Joe, regardless, I guess I was going to say maybe it's Ty Gibbs leading the playoff grid, but that doesn't make any sense because he doesn't have a win yet. So, but regardless, those two Gibbs teammates up there, 1-2 in the points. I think certainly Ford has to be scratching their heads a little bit. I think the speed has certainly been there, like we mentioned in qualifying, but I think when you look at their teams right now, maybe it's still taking them a little bit of time to figure out the car to start this year. And I think that there's certainly going to be some hard conversations to be had at all of their competition meetings this weekend here. I'm just trying to figure out off the top of my head. I guess, like you mentioned, Joe, the only Ford in the top 10 is Chris Buescher. They're down in 8th place. So, yeah, certainly. I mean, they'll be hard at work prepared for the next road course, that's for sure. But I think overall, certainly, if you had to pick a weak link out of the manufacturers to start this year, it's probably Ford.
Ford appears to be the weak link out of all the manufacturers. And I just think Ford in general, especially, Daytona, Atlanta, they're their own little thing. Bristol, that was something else with the tire management, but we've now got Vegas done. Here we are, the Circuits of the Americas. Overall, I think now they have to start saying, okay, we're 6 races in. We need to start we're behind the ball. We can't just say it's still early. Because before you know it, we're going to be 10 races in. We got some big tracks where I feel the Chevrolets, Toyotas, especially at Richmond, they're going to be some of the favorites to go out there, get the win. Overall, it's going to be really interesting to see what the Fords can do to get back up on the top step. And an interesting item, I know I mentioned a little bit about the stage cautions, but another NASCAR road course policy I got to bring up. We saw plenty of single car spins that occurred, but nobody stalled their car, so everyone kept running, proceeded with the race. But instead of using local cautions, they used the blue advisory flag, which is used to warn other drivers of an issue on track. Circuits of America is, of course, a big track. Similar to Road America, a full course caution there will just take a really long time per lap going around. So we saw no cautions for on-track incidents, just the stage breaks. We still saw 4 track limit penalties. Fox said NASCAR was using the same firm that does the software for Formula One for track limit enforcement, which we know sometimes that could be a heated discussion. How would you grade NASCAR officiating of this Cup Series race at COTA?
It was better than yesterday, but then again, I suppose perhaps that's a low bar given how some of the fans were reacting to that one. Listen, I know track limits can get people very heated, and people have very strong opinions about those. I tend to be of the Parker Kligerman mindset, rather, that if you don't want drivers using that part of a track, put something there that deters them from going there, like grass or wall or gravel or whatever the case may be. I also don't like the fact that we only penalize drivers for abusing track limits through yeses, but the rest of the course, you have them running well wide of the Formula One track limits because everything else that's paved appears to be fair game. And then finally, I think that the 30-second penalty, like the one that SVG got yesterday in the Xfinity race, way too harsh. I don't think you're picking up anywhere near that much of an advantage by shortcutting the S's to justify 30 seconds being added to your race time. So those are my thoughts on how the officiating goes, generally speaking, at this track for NASCAR. In terms of the race today, though, I appreciate that NASCAR let the single car spinners get going again before they were too trigger happy on the caution button. I just wish that we had kept with what we experimented with last year and not thrown the cautions during the stage breaks. And I got into a discussion with a couple of fans on X/Twitter after the race. I just personally, for me, don't understand the desire to have less racing. We went through this discussion when it came to shortening races a couple of years ago. Now we're having this discussion again when it comes to the stage breaks. When you have the caution be thrown for the stage breaks, we're being robbed of so many green flag laps. I mean, if we have to do the stage cautions so that we get the restarts, then I guess that's fine. But I also don't understand why the stage cautions are so long. Why are we wasting so much time under yellow and robbing the fans who paid their hard-earned money to come see a race? We're robbing them of more green flag laps by throwing these 2 mandatory cautions in the middle of the race. I hold the Carl Edwards philosophy that the yellow flag should only come out if there's a condition on the racetrack that requires it to be displayed because the track is unsafe. So obviously that's a standard officiating issue across the board that we tried something different last year. I personally enjoyed it very much. I'd like, of course, for the stages to go away entirely, but I know that ship sailed a long time ago. But I really liked what we saw last year. Apparently, the executives in the suits didn't, and we're back to where we were before 2023, which in my mind is a little bit unfortunate because I would have loved to have seen a caution-free race today. We had a close battle for the lead coming to a checkered flag. Christopher Bell closing in on William Byron after 38 consecutive laps of green flag racing. Who's to say we wouldn't have had something similar from start to finish after 68 laps? So I continue to be frustrated by the amount of green flag laps that we lose with these stage breaks, and I wish we could have kept with the experiment from last year. But as for what we could realistically get with the officiating today, I'd give them a solid B+. I think they did a pretty good job letting things play out as naturally as they could. Certainly better than Xfinity yesterday, and thank you, Adam, for siding with my views here.
I do wish we didn't have the stage cautions because last year we had 8 cautions and we had no stage breaks. And I felt we gave up too soon on, I believe it was the Roval, where they said, oh, no more stage cautions on the road courses. I was just disappointed there.
Yeah, well, and Joe, that one was especially ridiculous to me because you're changing the rules in the middle of your season when it comes time for a playoff race as well. So that, again, that's just a philosophical issue that I took with the decision that they made there. If you're going to change the rules back, at least wait until the offset. I mean, that would be like the NBA moving the 3-point line back 3 feet before the playoffs because they don't like how many threes we're seeing. I mean, it's just that was especially ridiculous to me. But again, I understand the argument that, restarts can be exciting. You want to see some potential for action there, but I don't know if they were thrilling enough to justify losing however many laps of green flag racing that we lost today.
Yeah. I mean, 4 laps under caution. Those take a long time at Circuits of America. We could have had a caution-free race. I would have wished NASCAR said, hey, let's try just 2 years rather than just 1 year, because I think last year's race, we know it got chaotic towards the end, but they moved the restart zone to prevent that. I think this would have been a great race, and 4 more laps, I think Christopher Bell could have been there and made a very good, entertaining finish, but those 4 laps gone with cautions during the stage breaks. Moving on to, I guess, sort of the final part of this NASCAR section, Shane Van Gisbergen. Many picked him to win, but he lost first gear, lost the pace, was just nowhere to really be able to go out there and get the win. Kamui Kobayashi, not a good day at all. Just got spun out, I believe, twice. Didn't have that great of a day, just seemed to struggle, which was a bit of a surprise for me. And this weekend, across all the series, I know you'll be talking about tomorrow on Grid Encore, we saw several road course specialists come here, but none of them took the win. So on the regular, so I have to ask, this really reestablishes that argument that the Cup Series drivers in NASCAR are so good now, especially in road courses, that what Shane Van Gisbergen did in Chicago was really something very unique that we don't see often.
Yeah, it certainly does. And again, I think it's important to remember that even though there are certainly a lot of similarities between road courses and street courses as opposed to ovals, that Chicago was a street course, and that was something that was brand new for almost everybody in the field other than SVG. So I think he certainly had the assistance of the atmosphere of that part of the race going for him there as well. But not to take away from what he did in July of last year. It was certainly thoroughly impressive. But you saw it today, and I got to be honest, I didn't realize he had lost first gear. I guess that would explain why he was so far off the pace towards the end there, especially compared to his colleague teammate AJ Allmendinger. But yeah, I mean, the field has certainly stepped up their game, and they've had to step up their game with how many road courses that we've added to the schedule last year. So I think that it's something that drivers can't take for granted anymore. The days of somebody getting pulled out of the car for 2 races a year and not really bothering to master the road courses because there's no real need for them to bother mastering the road courses. Those days are gone, especially now that we have a Roval or road course in the playoffs as well. You certainly need to be a good road racer if you're going to be a good competitor of a top level of this sport. And I think all the Cup Series drivers realize that, and that's why you continue to see so many different names up here dominating and winning these road course races.
The road course races, very competitive. Of course, Cup Series, very competitive series. And of course, they'll be back next weekend. Let's switch over towards IndyCar, another very competitive series, but their next point race is not till April. And what we had today was a exhibition all-star $1 million challenge at the Thermal Club in Palm Springs, California.
That's right, Joe. And the stage was set for the Thermal Club $1 million challenge, or the IndyCar All-Star race, whatever you want to call it. Felix Rosenqvist took the first heat race win. Hold on, Scott McLaughlin, Joseph Newgarden, Kristen Lundgaard, Augustine Canapita, and Colton Herta all advanced to the main event. Alex Palou dominated caution-free second heat. Marcus Armstrong, Graham Rahal, Linus Lundqvist, Pietro Fittipaldi, and Alexander Rossi all advanced to the big show. But it was Alex Palou who said goodbye to everyone in the 20-lap main event and hello to $500,000, so not quite the million that everyone expected. So, Ben, I'll start off with you. Alex Palou wasn't a factor for the win in St. Pete. Today, he won by 5.7 seconds. Was his driver at the Thermal Club a warning shot to Newgarden thinking about the championship long term?
Yeah, I mean, you have to take this one with a grain of salt, obviously, because it's not for points and not for a championship standings or anything. But yeah, I mean, it's certainly proof that Alex Palou hasn't forgotten how to win and hasn't forgotten how to drive an IndyCar. And he certainly, put on a show today. And again, I think it just goes back to what we talked about on the Roundtable show. I think that your top two protagonists this year are going to be Alex Palou and Joseph Newgarden until further notice. And so far, Alex Palou, again, from a standings point of view here, it doesn't help him. As you can see, he's still down in sixth place. But, we're only one race into the year when it comes to that conversation. And what we saw today, the talent is still there. The equipment is still there, obviously, with Ganassi. So, I think if I were Joseph Newgarden, I would certainly still view Palou as one of my top contenders, if not the top contender for the championship.
One of the contenders for the championship easily. The other thing I was thinking about too, and especially with what Alex Palou did, coming back, responding with the win, I think it will really emphasize you have to be perfect just about every race weekend in the IndyCar series. Alex Palou, part of the route to the championship last year, his consistency, worst finish, 8th place all last year. St. Pete didn't go his way, unfortunately, but one of the big things, though, he's still up there to going out there to try to get points for the championship. And overall, I think Alex Palou, Joseph Newgarden, those two could be the potential championship contenders. As you mentioned, Ben, it's going to come down who makes the least number of mistakes, who is just going to be near perfect each and every week, because this was a rough race for Joseph Newgarden. Overall, there was no points on the line, so he didn't have to stress about it. But he can't have 2 or 3 races like this if Alex Palou is going to come back strong. And Alex Palou cannot have a repeat of what happened in St. Pete. It's going to be really interesting to see which team could execute better.
And speaking of Joseph Newgarden, him and Alexander Rossi had a great battle for position, making contact with Byron for 7th and 8th in the race. But here's the interesting thing. Alexander Rossi was the only Aero McLaren driver in the main event. Yeah, that means no Paddle Award and no Callum Ilott, who's still filling in for the injured David Malukas. Joe, how disappointing was this for McLaren to only have one driver advancing to the $1 million challenge?
I would say it has to be very disappointing. The aspect that with this $1 million challenge at the Thermal Club, I know as Jackson had reported from the track, there was a lot of executives, big business people that really shelled out, could have potential influence, sponsorship opportunities. And then you come out here, granted, the timing of qualifying, the wind and everything did not work out. Come the race, they didn't perform. I just thought it really did not help McLaren look good at all. And I think one of the big things is for McLaren, just try to rebound this next race, because if the Thermal Club did work in the way that, we see more of these people wanting to invest into IndyCar, which we'll see how that ages, I guess, McLaren could really respond. But it has to be pretty not good feeling when it's like, oh, we're with McLaren, we're got this championship pedigree, and only one of your drivers just makes it into the field. And then the All-Star race, they were just more causing issues with Joseph Newgarden. I just don't think they had to feel that great leaving.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised that Rossi was the one. I would have predicted award if you had told me that only one McLaren was going to make it. But, maybe a good sign for Alexander Rossi. Of course, he's had a couple of down years since he first came into the series, looked like a perennial championship contender, and then a bit of a down year in 2020, and then a really down year in 2021. Now moving over to McLaren after riding it out with Andretti through the end of 22. So, I guess it's a confidence boost for him that he might see himself as perhaps in the best position over that team following this race weekend. But again, you have to take this weekend with a grain of salt for a whole number of reasons. But yeah, I mean, it certainly has to be a massive disappointment to have this build as an all-star challenge of sorts and to only have only one of your drivers make it to the actual main event. Certainly not a great look for McLaren.
Yeah, Ben, totally agree. I'm sure Zach Brown and everybody at Aaron McLaren was very disappointed. And I'll be honest, Alexander Rossi wouldn't have been my first choice for Aaron McLaren drivers who would have made the main event. I thought Pato O'Ward, who would basically be a lock to this event, kind of like Scott Dixon as well, who ended up not making an event. I can't even talk. Who ended up not making the main event as well. But yeah, I think it was overall disappointing for McLaren to only get one of their drivers in, but luckily this is exhibition event, so I can just brush aside and just keep on going with the rest of the season. And the main event itself had 10 laps, then a halftime break, and the drivers had to use the same tires for the final 10 laps from the start. Colton Herta was babying his tires, just taking care of it. Pietro Fittipaldi did the same. Christian Lundgaard tried to save tires and push to pass to the end. We know this is the first year of the new idea of having an all-star race. Ben, what do you think of this format, and what are some areas of improvement if they decide to do this again next year?
I thought the main event second half at least was all right. I know people have very strong feelings about all the different factors that went into putting this event on, and the fact that we lost the Texas race around this time of year for something like this, and NBC really showing how high end and exclusive this club is. I'll leave the rest of that to other people. I just want to focus on the race format here for the actual event itself. And I think that I personally wasn't a huge fan. I mean, it goes back to, what we talked about after the Daytona 500, the fact that you had AJ Allmendinger running faster laps by himself than the entire pack was, because the pack was trying to save fuel that much and slow themselves down that much to the point where that could happen. And, that I think in the eyes of a lot of fans wasn't a great look. I don't think it's ever a great look when you have drivers not going 100% to that extent. And I think it was even greater, even more apparent today on a road course where everything gets strung out, to have Colton Herta in particular going that much slower intentionally without any sort of car trouble, because the format entices you to do so to save your tires. If that's what the format asks of the drivers, I'm probably not going to be a huge fan of the format. So, again, I understand that it's built as an all-star challenge or an exhibition race. It gives you the opportunity to trial and test different things, but that result that we got, I'm not a huge fan of. Now, in terms of the actual finish of the race, I do think, it enabled Herta to, put on some good moves and charge for the field. And I suppose that provided some entertainment value. But again, it's more of a philosophical thing for me. I do still have some problems with this event. And again, I think that it certainly wasn't such a great slam dunk that it became an instant classic. And we certainly, have to find a regular place for this on the calendar for years to come. I think there's going to be a lot of questions being asked as we deal with the aftermath of this event for sure.
I do think there's potential for this kind of event. It's just a matter of making it work out the way it is to make some good TV, because this is sort of a made for TV event. I just felt when you have Colton Herta, Pietro Fittipaldi, other drivers just putting around for the first 10 laps, it just sort of feels like, okay, there's a loophole that they potentially see. They're going to try to make it work. It didn't exactly work out, but it just doesn't create that kind of must-see TV people talk about where you're hooked on, see what happens. Potentially, if you're into the strategy and you just knew, well, he could do it with the tire management, but with the dirty air, that was just going to make it really hard. I think some of the areas of improvement potentially just have a little bit of a shorter races, maybe more heats, because at the end of the day, the tire degradation, it wasn't as big enough as I think some people thought, because the rumor around the paddock we heard from Jackson was people anticipated that you could do what Colton Herta did and just zoom towards the front. That didn't exactly work out. Colton Herta tried it, didn't work. I think overall, if we could see one change for this, I think it'll be best a preseason event, potentially later in a Saturday evening. So you have some of that sunset, Palm Springs area gets beautiful sunset. Can't do it in the middle of the summer. It's over 100 plus degrees there. But preseason, get people hyped up for St. Pete's. I think that was a more appropriate area, and just keep working on the format. If this is going to be an all-star race, you can even just introduce a new format almost every year until you find something that works out.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll certainly be following what the NTT IndyCar Series decides to do with this all-star race event in 2025, if they decide to bring it back. And the one thing that I'll add, I think in order to get more fans involved, it would have been nice, to like have a fan vote or something, like we see with the NASCAR all-star race, where because with some big names missed the show, just like Scott Dixon and Pato O'Ward, and knowing how popular Pato is, I think if IndyCar had a fan vote for this Thermo Club $1 million challenge, Pato O'Ward probably would have been voted into the all-star race, just something extra, just to get the fans involved. And the first heat race started very messily with Scott Dixon, who got into Roman Grosjean, and Grosjean spun into Rinus VeeKay, ruining his fast weekend. Grosjean was understandably mad at Scott Dixon, who was penalized for avoidable contact. Grosjean was still mad when interviewed by NBC, but a video showed Grosjean yelling and swearing at a member of the AMR safety team. Joe, does IndyCar need to pull Grosjean to the side and discourage that interaction with the AMR safety team moving forward, or does it need to further address it like a penalty?
I do think IndyCar, the management, race control needs to pull Roman Grosjean to the side. It's like, look, we get it. You got in a crash. You're upset, and sometimes the safety crews, when they're trying to respond, they may not be taking actions where you feel like they're doing the wrong thing, that they're messing up. But they're in charge of your safety. Their main priority is not, oh, you need to get back in the race, or, oh, it's safety. Roman Grosjean, you could hear him and what he said to that safety crew member. These are the same people that go week after week after week. That was just really uncalled for. And I think it really Roman Grosjean got a big fan following after that big accident in Bahrain, which we all know the halo pretty much saved his life. And he went from sort of a driver that didn't exactly have a big fan following to sort of a folk hero, because he came out okay. Everybody learned more about his story, his family. Comes to IndyCar, and it just seems like year after year, he just seems to be getting more people upset. This was really upsetting. I think IndyCar does need to talk to him, have race control. Hey, go out there and at least apologize, because we get it. You're a racer. You want to go out there. Your race was ruined before you even got a shot to get going. But don't argue with the safety personnel. They're there for your safety. It was just really not a good look for Roman. And I just think IndyCar has to step in, because the last thing we want is more drivers getting the image. You could let this slide. And worse, drivers that are coming up the ranks seeing, oh, they do that at IndyCar. They do that in the higher level. So it's okay if I do that to my local marshals or volunteers. They have to make a statement. And now that I said that, maybe a penalty would be worth it, just to make that statement. Like, you listen to what they have to say.
Yeah, maybe though it's your monetary fine to him, because I saw the clip as well, and that type of behavior is totally uncalled for, because the AMR safety team, they always get a lot of credit for being one of the best safety teams there is in motorsports, and how much they care for the drivers and protect the drivers. And that's exactly what they're there for. Yeah, I know Roman Grosjean was very frustrated what happened. First lap of the heat race, I've been like already traveled all the way out to California, just for, and then tested all day the previous day and all that before, just for all of this to happen. And I know it's frustrating, but just because you're having a bad day, you shouldn't take it out on someone else. It was a real unfortunate sight to see him, get very frustrated with the AMR safety team member right there. But hopefully IndyCar will sit down with him and have a conversation, and to make sure something like this doesn't happen again, because they're there to help, not to hurt you. And the next NTT IndyCar Series race is on the streets of Long Beach on April 21st. For the first time since 2021, IndyCar won't be ranked in week 1 of the grid ranking. 2 races minimum for a series to be scored. We encourage everyone to check out this weekend's content from Jackson Lambert, who was at the track covering this weekend's IndyCar race at the Thermal Club. Also consider buying a coffee or super chat for Jackson to show your appreciation for his hard work this weekend. And here are Jackson's closing comments of the weekend.
A Spaniard has won pretty much everything this weekend, whether it's Moto 2, Moto 1, SMX. Carlos Sainz winning Australia yesterday, and now we find out that Alex Palou is still the fastest guy around and is $500,000 richer. Obviously not the on-track product we want, but still a lot of takeaways I want to share here. First of all, Agustin Canapino, who I really think is starting to turn into full IndyCar driver form, made the main event and was running up front comfortably behind Christian Lundgaard, who's been the guy I've been watching all weekend in terms of pace. Alexander Rossi, the fastest of all of the McLarens. Obviously, you could put that down to bad luck and on-track positioning, but he has been improving so much with this new team, and it's been awesome to see him up front. Colton Herta, back to seeing some vintage stuff from him. Obviously not the results he wanted, but again, made it to the main and was one of the few guys to actually pass on track. So let's actually talk about this whole on-track passing thing, and I want to start by saying I'm okay with this race. And that's going to spark a lot of not great thoughts. I can already hear Ben going for the Baja Blast. But, guys, this is one of the most challenging courses that the drivers have gone to in a while. In Felix Rosenquist's own words, it's not a gentleman track, and it's going to be hard to pass here regardless. But if you had this kind of format at any road course, whether it's Barber, Long Beach, you were going to have guys saving their tires in the first 10 laps and then going ham in the second half. And running up in front with the clean air, that was something that was destined to happen for Alex Palou. So the real question then, do we think Thermal is going to be back here next year? I'd like to see it. Genuinely, I think that this is a fantastic venue. If we can get more people here, as hard as that is with the $500 price tag, I'd love to see more people here. But I think they're offering a great product. You look at this compared to Formula One prices, $500, you get free food, all access to paddock in the pit lane. That's still pennies on the dollar for anything else with this level of access. I digress. I think still, if we were running this race 2 months ago or a month ago, and we were at a 1.5 mile oval somewhere else that I won't talk about right now, people would not be complaining to the extent that they have been. So, to really conclude here, we know that Alex Palou is fast, and that should be a shocker to no one. I believe Thermal will be back. I think the rules will be different in one way or another, and this is the start of potentially what could be something really, really cool. On you.
This is for you, Jackson.
Although
I have to say, I don't think I'm as upset as Alex might be. So make sure you tune into the Gay Racing Podcast for our friend Alex giving his thoughts on this race weekend. I know that he certainly has a lot to say. He couldn't be on the show tonight, but bottoms up, Alex, or Jackson, rather. Both of you guys, I guess. I don't even know anymore. Kobe, take it away with MotoGP.
Yeah, bottoms up.
I don't have a drink.
Well, if you're watching the MotoGP race, you might need a drink because it was an eventful MotoGP Portuguese Grand Prix that saw what many thought would happen. Two world champions collided. With 3 laps to go, Pecco Bagnaia was making a move on Marc Marquez for position. Marquez went wide, trying to close the door on Pecco. The two hit and slid out. 2 Ducati riders were out of the race, and Pecco dropped from the points lead to 4th. Davide Tardozzi, Ducati's team manager, wasn't happy to see a customer Ducati rider take out the defending champion and then points leader. FIM announced that investigation into the incident would take place. Joe, was this incident just a race incident or caused directly by one of the riders?
It's very interesting because when I saw the incident, I initially thought it was a racing incident. Marc Marquez, he went a little bit wide. He knew he had to block the bottom of the corner, move there, but Pecco Bagnaia was already there, and the two collided. I think overall, it's really interesting. There hasn't been anything said from the FIM, but one of the unique things is Marc Marquez is saying that the telemetry will reveal the truth, that it wasn't that he tried to turn down anything on him. So I think it's going to be really interesting because we've always heard people critical of Marc Marquez, how he races the other riders, very aggressive, willing to put himself in a bad spot where the other rider had to determine crash or not crash. It's going to be very interesting to see, but I think at the end it has to be super frustrating for Ducati because essentially their factory rider, who was the points leader, easily could have left with the points lead still, crashed out, no points, now fourth, and it's going to be a long season for Pecco Bagnaia.
Yeah, definitely going to be a long season. And the new points leader and race winner Jorge Martin is in a Prima Ducati, 18 points ahead of Brad Bender and 21 ahead of Nea Bastianini. So far, Jorge's worst finish is third in the Qatar Grand Prix and Portugal Sprint, with the win at the Qatar Sprint and Portuguese Grand Prix. He's the only rider to podium in both races. How challenging will it be for Pecco to catch Jorge?
I think it's going to be very challenging. I mean, Jorge really brought the fight, even had the points lead a couple times last year. This year, off to a great start. The confidence is there. I think he's not going to make the kind of mistakes, especially in the first 2 years that he was prone to making, where he was super fast or crashed out or even crashed out while leading. So he's going to be on the top of his game. Pecco Bagnaia, the season's early. He's going to be on top of his game, but if he's going to have Jorge Martin there, a position ahead or position behind him, it's going to get really hard to close that gap. But it's a very long season for him. It's just overall, I think when it comes to the challenges outside Ducati, Aprilia is looking good. I mean, Maverick Vinales got that sprint win. KTM, Brad Binder, he is there. If Jack Miller could put together a good, clean race, he could be up towards the front. I know we're going to talk about Gas, essentially the other KTM. The competition is stepping up towards Ducati, so it's not the big advantage like they had last year. So it's more than Jorge Martin.
Yeah, for sure. And that was a bizarre incident that cost Aprilia a podium finish on the last lap. Maverick Vinales was in third comfortably, but in turn one went wide. While on the dirt part of the track, he got high-sided and was out. This gave Pedro Acosta, the rookie, third place and his first podium result in MotoGP. Joe, it looked like Pedro was set for fourth place, but he earned his first podium. Has the rookie been turning some heads in the first two races?
Yes, Pedro Acosta, oh my goodness, 19 years old. This is only his second start. He got a podium, and this wasn't just, he started fifth, passed one bike, and then passed Maverick when he crashed out. No. First sprint race, who did he pass for position on the initial start? Marc Marquez. He has been putting on great effort at Qatar, and then this weekend, another great effort. He put moves on Marc Marquez for position, and then Pecco Bagnaia, a 19-year-old on a KTM customer bike. This is hugely impressive. They already talked about having him try out some of the development parts. The maturity level he is showing at 19 years old. This rider has a great future, and I got to say this. I think, as I mentioned, Jack Miller, if he doesn't clean up, if he's crashing too long, I think Jack Miller could be replaced by Pedro, and we're going to see him in a KTM. That'll be huge for KTM because this kid has talent, and I think he's going places.
Yeah, Pedro Acosta is probably a name that we'll have to keep watching in MotoGP as the races go on. So coming up is a 3-week break for MotoGP because Argentina got canceled. So the next race is Circuit of the Americas in Austin, Texas, where the NASCAR Cup Series raced at today. And now we switch back to Melbourne, Australia for the Repco Supercars Championship as we bring Ben back on.
Thank you, Kobe. That's right. The Repco Supercars Championship saw Triple Eight Racing sweep the first three races. Brock Feeney and then Brown, Feeney again, and then race 4 was Nick Percat. Now, Nick had a solid weekend overall and took the win in race 4. He's up to 4th in the standings, and considering he won the Bathurst 1000 on his first attempt, he hasn't had much success since, though. So, Kobe, with a win on a weekend where Triple Eight was in complete control, does this build confidence for him and Matt Stone Racing?
Absolutely. And I think that this was probably, the biggest surprise of the race weekend in Australia. Had four races, and Nick Percat was probably, way down on my list of drivers I would have picked to get a victory this weekend at the Australian Grand Prix race weekend. Yeah, but still, what a masterful drive by him. Remember, we were talking about Nick Percat, I believe, in the last season, early this season, how he lost his ride at Walkinshaw and Andretti United. We're thinking, Nick Percat's moving over to Matt Stone Racing to try to save his career because, his time at Walkinshaw, didn't really go the best. And for him to come out here and get a win, like you said, on the weekend that was mostly controlled by AAA Red Bull and Pole Racing, I think it's gonna definitely be a huge confidence boost for Nick Percat, because I'm sure even he didn't expect to be standing on the top step of the podium in this race. It was just one of those like feel good stories of an unexpected winner.
Well, Will Brown leads the championship now over his teammate Brock Feeney by 17 points. Chaz Mostert is the one in third, nearly 100 points behind Brown. Now in 2022 and 2021, SVG dominated. We said somebody needs to step up. Last year, that was Brody Kostecki and Erebus Motorsports who brought the fight. But Kobe, is this starting to look like those two previous years where Triple Eight might just run away with it all?
Yeah, based on what we've seen so far, it looks like it might be a championship season that comes down to the teammates, Will Brown and Brock Feeney, because those two drivers, they're just doing have some incredible things, having a very strong start to the 2024 season. And right now, I don't really see anyone who can consistently challenge Triple Eight for the Supercars Championship. Yes, it's still very early on in the season, but we'll have to see what they're able to do moving forward the rest of the field to try to catch up to Brown and Feeney. But right now, it seems like if you want to win this championship, you certainly have to go through Red Bull and Pro Racing, the Triple Eight operation.
All right, we'll leave it there, and we'll certainly be following the rest of the Supercar season as we continue to work through 2024. In the meantime, let's move into the final part of our show tonight, the one shining moment.
Yeah, that's right. And for all our viewers watching, wherever you are in the world, please put it in the chat below. What's your great one shining moment? What's the one thing that stood out to you the most from this racing weekend? And starting with you, Ben, what's your good one shining moment?
We're going to talk about the whole situation a lot more, I think, on the Encore show tomorrow. But my one shining moment, it's not obviously what sparked this happening, but it's how it was handled by the driver that was affected by it. I want to give a shining moment to Logan Sargent, and I know that it was a very difficult situation for him to be removed from his car based on a teammate that his mistake made. I want to be very clear as well when I say this. I don't, I'm not trying to slam Alex Albon or anything, even though he did come up short of scoring points today. I feel badly for him too, because ultimately it wasn't his decision. It was a team decision that was made on his behalf. And he took a lot of heat for what was going on at Williams this weekend, and I think unjustifiably so. I just wish that, fans could look at that picture a little bit more fully and not put any of the blame on him, because I think there certainly needs to be a conversation over what happened with Williams this weekend and the decision that was made. And again, we'll have that tomorrow. But as for Logan Sargent, I can tell you that if I had been in that position, I don't know that I could have handled it with as much grace and compassion as he did, to continue to be with the team this weekend and go through all the usual social media posts and everything, and be a part of the weekend for the Williams team, even though he wasn't driving his car because the car had been given to his teammate. I think showed tremendous class. And, people can say what they will about the lack of results that he's had. I think people have to remember that this isn't the Williams of the 90s that was competing for championships. He's not in a very good car to begin with. And he's certainly, been given another opportunity to come into his own this year, and it's a long season ahead. We'll see what he can do. I personally think, from what we've seen the first two races, I think he has taken a little bit of a step up from where he was towards the end of last year. And I think it's just very unfortunate that he was pulled from his car this weekend, and might be a shot to his confidence. But then again, maybe as our friend Ed Hunter and I were going back and forth in our comment section a little bit this week, maybe this is going to be an opportunity for him to come back from this and show why he does belong in this sport and does deserve the opportunity that was given to him by Williams to come back for a second season. So my shining moment, to sum it all up, is how Logan Sargent reacted to the news and how he handled it throughout the weekend. I think it was completely professional, and that was certainly great to see. And John 082 says, my one shining moment, SVG running up front all day in Xfinity and dumping Austin Hill. Well, again, certainly more on that conversation tomorrow. That's certainly not a shining moment for me, is how the Xfinity race was officiated. So we'll leave it at that. Stay tuned for more comments on the Encore show.
Yeah, been looking at Logan Sargent this weekend. I think he certainly did a really great job handling himself. Has a lot to be proud of, and like they say, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And for his sake, hopefully this ends up making him stronger and lights a fire under him, so he go out there and, like you say, show that he belonged in Formula One. I also agree with the point you brought up. That based on what we've seen so far this year, it seemed like he has improved compared to last season. So hopefully Logan only sees this as a brief setback, and he can come back, the next race weekend and throughout the rest of the season and just keep proving any doubters he had wrong. My one shining moment, I'm going to give it to smooth operator Carlos Sainz. I thought he did a really great job going out there, dominating the race after Max Verstappen went out, and to do this, just only a short amount of time after he had his appendix out. I thought that was very impressive because, Carlos Sainz is still not back to 100% fitness yet, and watching him get out of the car very gingerly, you can tell, he's still feeling some of the, effects from the surgery, and it's going to take him a minute before he'll get back to 100% fitness. But for him to go out there, dominate the race, and especially with everything he's just been through, he was just in a hospital bed just a couple of weeks ago, unexpectedly, and look at him now. He was standing on the top step of the podium, and like we were saying during our Formula One segment, Sainz has a lot to prove to Ferrari that they made a mistake by not signing him long-term and signing Hamilton over him. So Sainz is going to be auditioning for another quality F1 ride for the rest of this year.
Certainly a lot to look forward to for the rest of the season, and that's going to do it for our show tonight. Speaking of shining moments, as always, shining moment to our Patreon supporters, people that support us over there. Thank you so much, Colin Deschelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew. Your support means the world to us. It's what allows for things like this weekend with Jackson representing our network over at the Thermal Club. And thanks again to him for the great coverage there. You too can invest in the Grid Network if you liked what you saw tonight. If you like what you saw this weekend from Jackson as well, make sure you click on the link in the video description box below. Or you can also choose a one-time investment if you'd rather through Buy Me a Coffee, or if you're watching on YouTube, we have Super Chats enabled as well. $10 by either of those methods, and we will send you some Grid Network stickers, as of course we will if you join our Patreon. If you can't support us financially, make sure you support us through all of our social media platforms, especially right here on YouTube. You can see it across the bottom of our screen right now. We are so close to that milestone of 1,000 subscribers. So make sure you subscribe and hit the bell icon so that you're notified every time we host a new show or upload a new video. Now, tomorrow, as I've mentioned several times tonight, we will be back on the air with myself and Brandon Crossland at the minimum. We'll see if anyone else is able to join us because we have a lot to discuss on Grid Live Encore. Wednesday, Kobe will be back with Grid Tonight, your weekly motorsports news program with Josh Birch and Matt White. Women in Motorsports will be back again this week as well with myself, Joe Samaniego, and Isha Azim on Thursday. And then on Saturday, we start the Grid Live process all over again with our pre-race show. Formula E will be in Tokyo for their E-Prix, NASCAR at Richmond, and the World Rally Championship for Rally Kenya Safari. For Kobe Lambeth, for Joe Samaniego, I'm Ben Schneider. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful night. We'll see you tomorrow for Encore.